"We've no room here for a woman with no husband and no money," the boarding house keeper said, and she said it flat, the way a person reads a price off a card. Then she shut the door, and the sound of the bolt was louder than the words had been. If you have ever stood on a strange street at dusk with everything you owned in one hand and everything you loved in the other, you know the particular cold of that moment. It is not weather, it is the cold of being counted and found to be worth nothing. Stay with me a while. This is the part of the story where the doors close. It is not the part where it ends. Her name was Clementine Ainsley, and she was 23 years old, and she had come to Cedar Gap, Wyoming Territory, in the last week of September 1888 on the strength of a letter. The letter was folded in her coat pocket, gone soft as cloth from handling. It was from a woman named Prudence Hobart, who had known Clementine's mother back in Nebraska, and who had written in a wide looping hand that the Cedar Gap Hotel wanted a cook who could keep her feet under her, and that a young widow with a baby would be welcome there, and that the room off the kitchen had a window that caught the morning. Prudence Hobart had died in June. The hotel had changed hands in July. The man who owned it now had listened to Clementine read the letter aloud on the front walk, and when she finished he had said that he was sorry for her trouble, but that a kitchen was no place for an infant, and that folks did not like to hear a baby crying while they ate their supper. That had been at 4 in the afternoon. By 6 she had tried the boarding house, and the bolt had gone home. By 6:30 she had walked to the church at the end of Bishop Street, where a preacher's wife with kind eyes and a nervous mouth had explained that the parsonage had only the 2 rooms, and that the deacons had lately been strict about the parish fund, and that there was a poor farm over at Rawlins, a good distance off, but respectable, and had she thought of going back to her people? Clementine had not told her that her people were 3 graves in Nebraska, and 1 in a draw 60 miles east of where she stood. By 7 she was on the steps of Thatcher's Mercantile, with her back against the doorframe and the town going grey around her. Everything she owned was tied to the rail behind her: a leggy bay mare named Pilgrim, a saddle worth more than the mare, and a canvas roll with her father's rope in it, and a wooden box of her dead husband's papers. She had a daughter, 4 months old, named Jasper, after Amos Ainsley's mother, who had been a hard woman with a soft name, and had loved her son fiercely, and she had $11.40. She counted it there on the step, because counting was a thing she could do when there was nothing else, and because she had been raised by a man who said that a person who knows her number is never truly lost. $11? 4 dimes? She laid the coins in a row on her knee, and Jasper fretted against her shoulder, the small furious complaint of a baby who is hungry and cannot say so, and Clementine put the coins back in her pocket one at a time and did not cry. Amos had been dead since February. They had taken the place at Elkhorn Draw the autumn before that. The bank had come with a paper and a number on it, and the number had not been the number Amos remembered, and he had argued about it in the doorway with his hat in his hands, like a man asking a favour in his own house. Afterward, he had said, in the way of a man who has decided to be reasonable because the alternative is to be wild, that a fellow could not fight arithmetic, and that they would take wages for a season and put it back together. He had worked that winter on a hay contract out of Green River, and had come home in January coughing, and had been dead by the middle of February, and the doctor had said pneumonia, and had charged her $4, and she had paid it, because you pay what you owe. Jasper had been born in the last week of May, in a rented soddy at Sage Creek, with a neighbour woman and a lamp and a February widow's grief, and her father 3 months in the ground. She had kept his rope, she had kept his papers, she had kept the mare because a person who sells her last horse has agreed to stop going anywhere. Down the street the lamps went on in the hotel dining room, one and then another, and laid warm yellow squares on the boardwalk for somebody else. Jasper began, at last, to cry in earnest. Clementine stood up and walked her, 3 steps one way and 3 steps back, the whole width of the mercantile step, patting the small back through the blanket, saying the things you say, which are not words so much as a sound a woman makes when she is holding on. That was when the wagon stopped. She heard it before she looked, the brake going on and the harness settling, and she did not look up right away because she had been looked at all afternoon, and none of it had been any good. "Ma'am?" She looked. He was a tall man, 35 or thereabouts, with a week of beard and a face that had forgotten what it was for. Not unkind, empty, the way a house is empty. He had his hat off already and was turning it once in his hand. the way a man does when he has stopped himself from saying the first thing. "That your mare?" he said. "She is. She's cast a shoe on the near hind, half a shoe. She'll be lame by morning if she stands on it." Clementine looked at Pilgrim, and she had known it since Sage Creek, and there had been nothing to be done about it, and she was too tired to pretend otherwise, so she said, "I know it." He nodded slowly. He looked at the mare a while longer, and then at the canvas roll, and then at the baby, and then, briefly, at the closed door of the mercantile behind her, and something went across his face that she could not read. "You waiting on somebody?" "No." "You got a place tonight?" "No." She said it plainly, because there was no version of it that sounded better, and because she had gotten tired around 5 o'clock of arranging her ruin into a shape that would be easier for strangers to look at. He was quiet for a moment. A dog barked somewhere down by the corrals. Then he said, "My name's Judah Yardley. I run the bar R out on Cedar Creek about 7 miles. It's a poor outfit right now, and I won't say otherwise. There's a house on it with 4 rooms, and I use one. There's a stove that draws and a door on the spare room that locks from the inside, and I'll hand you the key when we get there." Clementine did not answer. She had learned, in 8 months of being a widow, exactly what such offers usually cost. He seemed to know it. He put his hat back on. "I've got 160 head that ain't been looked at proper since spring," he said, "and books I can't read and won't, and no hand but a boy who comes Tuesdays. I'd pay you what I'd pay a man, which right now is not much, and I'd pay it whether you can cook or not. That's work, ma'am. It isn't charity, and I'd be obliged if you didn't take it for charity, because I haven't got the temperament to be thanked." "There's a baby," she said. "I can see that. Folks have been telling me all day what a baby costs." Judah Yardley looked at her then, direct, and for the first time there was something behind his eyes instead of the empty rooms. "You're no burden here, miss," he said. "Not you and not her. I've got more room than I've got use for, and that's the whole of my trouble, and it doesn't cost me one thing to have a lamp lit in a room I'm not sitting in." Clementine Ainsley had held herself together on $11.40 through a boarding house, a church, and a hotel man who was sorry for her trouble. She held herself together through that too, but it was a near thing, and she had to look away down Bishop Street for a moment before she could speak. "I'll want the key," she said. "You'll have it. And I'll draw wages, written down, what I earn and what I've drawn." "Write it down however you like," Judah said. "I take it as a mercy if somebody round there wrote something down." He got off the wagon, and he did not reach for the baby, which she noticed, and he did not take her arm, which she noticed too. He took the canvas roll and set it in the bed. He untied Pilgrim and looked at the ruined hoof and made a small sound in his throat and tied her on behind, slack, so she could pick her way. Then he stood aside and let Clementine climb up on her own, which was the third thing she noticed and the one she thought about longest. They went out of Cedar Gap in the dark, with the lamps behind them. For 3 miles neither of them said anything. The road ran up along the creek, and Jasper quieted with the motion the way babies do, and the cold came up off the water. Judah reached under the seat with one hand and pulled out a folded horse blanket and held it out sideways without looking, and Clementine took it and put it over the baby and said thank you, and he said nothing at all. Then, a mile later, out of the dark, he said, "There's a crib in the house." She turned her head. "It's in the room I gave you," he said. "I'd have moved it out if I'd had more notice. You can put it in the barn if it troubles you. It won't trouble me. I mean, it will, but I've been letting it." The wagon went on. The creek talked in the willows. "My wife was named Ada," Judah said. "We had a boy, called him Samuel, after her father. The fever came up the creek 3 winters back and took the Dolans first, and then it came to us, and it took her on a Thursday and him on the Saturday, and I have never in my life been able to make sense of that order or any other." Clementine sat with the weight of her daughter against her chest and looked at the black shapes of the cottonwoods going by. "My husband died in February," she said. "Amos, pneumonia," the doctor said. "We lost our place first. I think the place is what killed him, if you want the truth of it. The dying was just the last of it." Judah nodded once. "Then you know," he said. "I know." "Then that's all we'll say about it tonight," he said, "unless you want to say more, in which case I'm not going anywhere." They came up over the last rise, and there was the bar R below them, a low house and a barn and a set of corrals, and one light burning in a kitchen window because the man had gone to town and left a lamp for a house with nobody in it. Clementine looked at that light a long time. She had prayed in the draw at Elkhorn in the weeks after February for a great many things. She had prayed for the place back and had not gotten it. She had prayed for Amos and had gotten a grave with a stone she had cut the letters into herself. Badly. Lately she had stopped asking for much of anything, on the grounds that it seemed to embarrass everybody involved. What she had prayed for last, and smallest, and most often, was simply somewhere to put the baby down. She was up before him the first morning, and that set the pattern for everything after. The bar kitchen had a good stove and bad management. There was flour that had gone to Weevil and coffee that had not, and a stack of dishes that a man had been washing one at a time as he needed them for what looked like a year. Clementine put Jasper in the crib in the corner where she could see her, and she cleaned the kitchen before the sun cleared the ridge, because a person who does not know where to start should start with the floor. Judah came in at 6 and stood in his own doorway, like a man who has walked into the wrong house. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know it. There's no pay in it. There's no pay in living in a mess either," Clementine said. "Sit down. I've made your breakfast." He sat down. He ate. Then he got up and poured the coffee, and Clementine took the first swallow and stopped and looked into the cup. It was good coffee. It was, in fact, the best coffee she had tasted in 3 years, dark and clean with no bitterness at the back of it, and she said so. Judah Yardley looked at the tabletop, and something happened around his mouth that was not quite a smile but was related to one. "It's the only thing I do," he said. "There's men who do less." "Not many that do less well," he said, and went out to catch the horses. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, the Tuesday boy let it slip that Judah had trimmed and reset Pilgrim's shoe by lantern light the night they came in, after Clementine had gone to bed, and had packed the hoof with tar besides, and had never said one word about it. The mare came sound inside of 10 days. It was the second time Clementine cried that year, and she did it in the barn where nobody could watch her do it. By Thursday, she had ridden the whole east fence with Jasper strapped against her in a rig she made from a grain sack and 2 lengths of latigo, and she had found 9 posts down in the willow bottom, and a gate wired shut with baling wire rusted through, and 30-odd head of bar cattle standing on the wrong side of it in another man's meadow hay. By Saturday she had doctored a heifer calf with the scours, which meant she had held it between her knees in the mud and drenched it from a bottle and come away slime to the elbow, and she walked up to the house afterward with her hair down and her sleeves black, and the baby howling from the fence post where she had propped her out of the way. Judah watched the last part of it from the barn door. "You've done that before," he said. "My father ran 400 head on the loop," Clementine said. "I could rope before I could read. He hadn't any sons and he never apologized for it. Ada couldn't have gone near that calf. Ada didn't have to." "No," he agreed. "She had me, and I was worth something then." He said it without self-pity, which made it worse to hear. Then, "You'll want to see to that hand. It's bleeding." It was. She had not noticed. He fetched the salve himself and set it on the rail and walked off and let her do it, and Clementine thought about that all through supper, because in 8 months no one had managed to help her without also somehow making her smaller. The books came out the 3rd week. They were in a flour sack in the bottom of a wardrobe, which is where a man puts a thing he has decided not to look at, and Judah set the sack on the kitchen table and stepped back from it as though it might go off. "Ada kept them," he said. "After, I just put the papers in there." "All of them?" "Everything that came. I opened the ones that looked like they'd make trouble if I didn't." Clementine emptied the sack. 3 years of a ranch came out onto the oilcloth, tally sheets, a stock association assessment, freight receipts from Rock Springs, a bill from a doctor in Cedar Gap dated the winter Ada died, still unpaid, and folded flat at the bottom, the mortgage. She sat down with a pencil and a sheet of butcher paper and did what her father had taught her, which is that you do not argue with a number. You put every number you have into a column, and then you look at the column until it tells you something. It took her 4 nights. On the 4th night she said, "Judah, what did you borrow?" He was oiling a bridle by the lamp. 2,000 against the deeded quarter and the creek frontage. It was after the fever. I had the doctor and the burying, and I'd lost the whole calf crop that spring because I wasn't fit to work and hadn't the sense to say so. 2,000 even? 2,000 even. 8%. Ruth Waverley wrote it himself, and shook my hand across the desk and said, "Take your time, Judah. A man's got to grieve." Clementine turned the butcher paper around and pushed it across the table. "Then why," she said, "does the bank say you owe $3,180? The bridle stopped moving. "Interest," Judah said. 2,000 at 8% for 3 years is 480 in interest, and you have paid 410 of it, which I can show you, because you kept the receipts even if you never read them. You should owe 2,070. Their statement says 3,180. That's, He stopped and did the sum himself. Twice. That's $1,100. That is $1,110, Clementine said. I don't guess at money. Judah put the bridle down. It's likely a mistake, he said slowly. Waverley holds the whole Valley's paper in that office. A clerk could set a figure in the wrong column. It could be, said Clementine. But she had been the wife of a man who stood in his own doorway with his hat in his hands and said that a fellow could not fight arithmetic, and there was a cold place in her chest that had been there since the autumn they took the place at Elkhorn Draw, and it had just moved. She went to town on Friday for salt and nails, and she went to Thatcher's because the mercantile had turned her away on its step, but the feed store beside it had not, and because Delly Thatcher was the sort of woman who knew things. Delly was 60, sharp as a bent nail, and had run the feed store since her husband was kicked in the head by a mule in '79. She looked Clementine over from the doorway to the boots. You're the Yardley woman, she said. I'm the Ainsley woman. I work for Yardley. Said Delly, in a way that took in the whole town's opinion and set it aside without endorsing it. Well, somebody's got him eating. He looks less like a scarecrow than he did in July. Clementine set her list on the counter. I want to ask you something, and I'd take it kindly if you didn't repeat it. Honey, I repeat everything. It's my stock in trade. But I don't repeat it wrong, and I don't repeat it to the wrong party, which is more than you'll get out of the church. Delly put her elbows on the counter. Ask, how many outfits along this creek have gone under in the last 3 years? Delly Thatcher did not have to think about it. Sedge, she said. Marta Sedge, up the North Fork, went in '87, and she is living in a shack behind her son-in-law's place at Bitter Springs and mad enough to chew harness. The Coils, that same year. Old Pettibone that same fall, and he had water enough for 2 outfits. The Dolan place, but the Dolans died of the fever, so that one doesn't count the same. She had counted them off on her fingers, and then she stopped, and her face changed, and every last one of them fronted on Cedar Creek or the North Fork of it. Who bought them? Sheriff's sale, mostly. Went cheap. Cheap enough it made talk. Bought by whom, Mrs. Thatcher? Delly looked at the front window, at the empty street, in the way of a woman who has decided to say a thing and is checking the price of it first. The Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company, she said, which is Rufe Waverley, and 2 fellows in Omaha nobody has ever laid eyes on. He'll tell you he is only holding it till the country settles. He held Pettibone's 2 years and never ran a cow on it. She spread her hands. Now what does a man want with grass he doesn't graze? He doesn't want the grass, Clementine said. No, said Delly Thatcher. He does not. She met Rufe Waverley 6 days later at the land office, where she had gone to look at the plat book on the pretext of asking after strays. He was a handsome man of about 50 in a grey suit, and he had the finest manners she had met with west of Nebraska. He took his hat off inside a public building. He asked after the baby by name, which meant he had asked somebody. He said he had heard she had a hand with sick stock, and that the country was short of people who could do anything at all. Then he said, Mrs. Ainsley, may I be forward? I expect you will be. Either way. Waverley smiled as though she had paid him a compliment. There is a position in town that would suit you. My sister-in-law keeps my house, and she is not young, and she has been at me a year to find a woman of good character to help her. $20 a month, your own room, the child welcome, a stove that works, neighbours, a church 2 streets over. He let a beat pass. It is a hard thing to say kindly, so I will say it plainly instead. A young widow alone on a place with an unmarried man will be talked about, and talk in a small town is a debt that compounds faster than money. I would spare you that. $20 was more than double what Judah could pay her, and both of them knew it. That's generous, Clementine said. It is practical. Generosity is cheap. I prefer to be practical. And what would you want for it? Nothing whatever, said Rufe Waverley, beyond the satisfaction of seeing a decent woman decently housed. He put his hat back on. Think it over. The Bar R is a sad place, Mrs. Ainsley. It has been sad 3 years, and I do not believe it will stop, and a person can drown holding on to a man who has already gone under. He was nearly to the door when she said, Mr. Waverley, does your company still hold the Pettibone quarter? He turned around. For half a second, no longer, and she would have missed it had she not been raised by a horse trader. The pleasantness went out of his face, and something underneath it looked at her and measured her and put the pleasantness back on. We do, he said. Water rights are a complicated business, and the country will be better served when they are held in one steady hand than parcelled among 40 men who cannot agree upon a ditch. Good day to you. She rode home and did not tell Judah about the offer, And then at supper she did tell him, because she had decided years before that she would rather be honest than comfortable. He listened. He did not say she should take it, and he did not say she should not. What he said was, "He wants the creek. Say it out." Judah pushed his plate back. "Cedar Creek is the only live water between the Sweetwater and the Divide," he said. "In a dry year, every outfit south of here waters on it, or goes without. Whoever holds the frontage from the north fork down to the old Coil place holds this whole valley by the throat. He has Pettibone, he has Coil, he has Sedge." He looked up. "The Bar R is the middle mile. Without my mile, all he has got is 2 ends of a rope." The lamp hissed. In the corner, in the crib that had been Samuel's, Jasper turned over in her sleep and sighed. "He offered me $1,200 for it in the spring," Judah said. "I told him no. He didn't argue. He shook my hand and said he admired a man who knew his own mind." He laughed, one short sound with nothing in it. 3 weeks after that, the statement came with the new figure on it. Clementine got up and fetched the butcher paper and laid it between them. "Then, it isn't a Clark," she said. She rode to Bitter Springs on the last Monday in October, 40 miles out and 40 back, with the baby in the shawl rig and a cold rain coming sideways off the Divide for the last 9 miles of it. Marta Sedge lived in a one-room shack behind her son-in-law's barn, and she was 61 years old and built like a fence post. And when Clementine said the words, "Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company," Marta Sedge set down the coffee pot and sat on the bed and put both hands flat on her knees. "Say that again," she said. Clementine said it again. "A year," Marta said. "A year I have been telling people, and every one of them has looked at me the way you look at a dog that bites. Sorry and careful, and not one bit convinced." She turned her head and looked at the wall. "My man built that house. I buried him under the cottonwood at the crossing, and I couldn't take him with me when I went, so he is still up there on Ruth Waverley's ground." "Tell me the whole of it," Clementine said, slow, from the first paper. It took 2 hours, and Clementine wrote it all down. Marta Sedge had borrowed $900 in '84 against her North Fork frontage at 7%, and she had paid on it every fall out of the steer money like clockwork. In the spring of '87, a statement had come showing $1,600 owed. She had gone into the bank and said there was an error, and Ruth Waverley had been sorry as a preacher, and had shown her a document in the file, an amendment to the original note, adding $600 advanced for improvements and a penalty clause. "Signed," he said, by Marta Sedge herself in the presence of the land office recorder. "And I looked at that signature," Marta said, "and it was my name. It was my name and it wasn't my hand, and I said so, and I said it loud, and I said it in front of the bank and in front of the sheriff, and do you know what a woman gets for saying it loud?" "She gets called hysterical," Clementine said. "She gets called hysterical." Marta Sedge nodded once, hard. "They sold my place that September for $1,100, and the company bought it, and there was nobody else bidding, and Waverley himself patted my arm outside the courthouse and said, 'Mrs. Sedge, we shall all of us look after you.'" Clementine looked down at her notebook. $600 advanced for improvements, a penalty clause, an amendment in the file that the borrower had never signed, witnessed by the land office recorder, $1,110 on the Bar R, an amendment she had not yet seen, and that same autumn, in a doorway at Elkhorn Draw, a paper with a number on it that had not been the number Amos remembered. "Mrs. Sedge," she said, "will you say all of this again in front of other people who have lost places?" "I've been saying it to a barn wall for a year," Marta said. "I'd say it to the devil for the pleasure of being heard." They met in the back of Thatcher's feed store on the 8th of November, after closing, with the shutters up and a lamp on a nail keg. Deli Thatcher got them there. Marta Sedge came in on the stage. The younger Coil boy came, Wesley, who was punching cows for wages now on an outfit that had boarded his father's. Old Pettibone was too far gone in his mind to come, but his daughter came, and she brought a hat box with every paper her father had ever been handed. There were 11 people in that room, and 9 of them had never once spoken to each other about the thing that had happened to them, because ruin is a private business, and every one of them had believed it was their own fault. Clementine stood up with the butcher paper. She did not make a speech. She read out numbers. Sedge, 900 borrowed, 1,600 claimed. Coil, 1,400 borrowed, 2,600 claimed. Pettibone, 600 borrowed, 1,300 claimed. Yardley, 2,000 borrowed, 3,180 claimed. And in every case, in the file at the bank, an amendment nobody remembered signing, adding a sum advanced for improvements nobody remembered receiving, witnessed by the same man. When she finished, nobody spoke for a while. Then Wesley Coyle said, in the voice of a man learning a thing about his own father, "Then Pa didn't lose it drinking." "No," Clementine said. "Your father lost it because a man in a grey suit wrote a number on a piece of paper." "What do we do?" "I don't know yet," she said. "I know what we don't do. We don't go one at a time to that bank and stand in front of that desk with our hats in our hands, because that is exactly the room he built, and every one of us has already lost in it." Judah had come in with her and had stood at the back the whole time with his shoulder against the doorframe and had not said one word. He said one now. "We'll pay a lawyer," he said. "Not a Cedar Gap lawyer, a Cheyenne one. I'll put up the first of it." "You haven't got the first of it," said Deli Thatcher. "Then I'll sell the good saddle horses," Judah said, "and I'll ride a bad one, and it'll be the first useful thing I've done in 3 years. Marta Sedge stood up and put $4 silver on the nail keg. By the time they blew the lamp out, there was $91 on that keg, in coin and in paper and in 1 gold ring, and Clementine wrote every name and every amount in the back of her notebook, because it was other people's money now, and you keep a clean book with other people's money. Walking out to the wagon, Judah said, "You said we?" "Did I?" "You've been saying I since September. Tonight you said we, about 9 times. Clementine settled the baby and did not look at him. "It's a shorter word," she said. "It is," Judah agreed, and unwrapped the lines and let her have it. Solomon Barlow was the land office recorder, a soft, worried man of 40 with ink on 3 fingers and a way of looking at the door. Clementine went to him twice as a citizen and got nowhere, so the 3rd time she went as a customer. She paid the fee and asked for certified copies of the recorded instruments touching 7/4 sections along Cedar Creek, and she paid for every page, and the law said he had to give them to her, and he knew the law better than he wanted to. She sat in the front of the land office for 6 hours on the 10th of December, copying what he would not certify, and Jasper slept in the basket at her feet, and Solomon Barlow got up 11 times to look out the window at the street. At the 4th hour, she found it. The amendments were all there, recorded, stamped, indexed. Sedge, Coyle, Pettibone, Dolan, even the Dolans who had died. Yardley recorded the 22nd of April, 1888, 3 weeks after Judah told Ruth Waverley he would not sell, and on page 209 of the 87 book, in the same square hand, recorded the 9th of February, 1887, but dated the 14th of October of the year before, an amendment to a note held against a homestead in Elkhorn Draw in the county to the east, filed as a courtesy recording by the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company. Amos Ainsley, $800 borrowed, $410 advanced for improvements. Clementine sat very still in a cold room with her pen in her hand. Amos had never taken $410 from any man alive. Amos had once walked 11 miles rather than borrow a horse. She had stood beside him in that doorway and watched him take his hat off in his own house, and she had believed, for a year and more, in the small mean back of her mind where you keep the things you are ashamed of, that her husband must have done something foolish and been too proud to tell her. He had not. He had been robbed. And then he had gone out on a hay contract in January to earn it back, and the cough had started, and she had washed him and buried him at 22 years old with his child not yet born, and the man who did it had taken his hat off to her in this very building and asked after her daughter by name. She did not weep. She wrote the page number down, and the volume, and the date of the entry. Then she looked at the amendment for a long time, and she saw the second thing. At the foot of each amendment form, small in the margin, was a printer's mark, a stationer in Cheyenne, and beneath it the words, in type no bigger than a seed, Form 9, 1887. The Sedge Amendment was dated the 9th of March, 1886. The Coyle Amendment was dated the 2nd of August, 1886. Amos Ainsley's amendment was dated the 14th of October, 1886. Every one of them had been written on a form that did not exist until the following year, and every one of them had been carried into that office and recorded in the winter of 1887, months after the day written at the top of it, which is not a thing that happens with a paper a man signs across a desk. Clementine closed the book, and the sound of it made Solomon Barlow jump. "Mr. Barlow," she said, "how long have you been recorder?" 9 years, he said. "Ma'am, do you like it?" He looked at her, and at the book, and at the door. "You should go home," he said. "You should go home, Mrs. Ainsley, and take your baby, and you should mind the man you work for because he has got troubles enough. That's not an answer. It is the only one I have got, said Solomon Barlow, and his hands were shaking, and Clementine put every copy she had made into her coat and walked out into the snow, and knew, all the way to the livery, that she had just been given the best answer of the whole affair. Lemuel Bardsley came up from Cheyenne on the 11th of January. He was 70 years old and slow-moving, and he had prosecuted land fraud for the United States Land Office for 11 years, before he went into practice for himself. He sat at the bar our kitchen table for 2 full days, and read every page Clementine had assembled, and drank a great deal of Judah's coffee, and said almost nothing. At the end of the second day, he took his spectacles off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Ainsley," he said, "who did this work?" "I did." "You had help." "I had a feed store, a mad widow, and a man who sold 4 horses." Lemuel Bardsley laughed once dryly. "In 11 years with the government," he said, "I saw perhaps 4 cases assembled this cleanly, and every one of them was put together by 3 men and a stenographer over 8 months. He tapped the stack. "You have got the pattern, you have got the victims, you have got the recording dates against the sale dates, and you have got a printer's mark that is going to hang him." "Will it hold?" Judah said. "It will hold," Bardsley said, "if 2 things happen. First, we must go to the district court in Cheyenne, and not 1 step into a Cedar Gap courtroom, because your local bar and your local bench eat Sunday dinner at that man's table." He put his spectacles back on. "Second, that recorder must break. Everything you have got proves the papers are false. It does not yet prove whose hand made them false. I want the man who held the pen." "He's frightened to death," Clementine said. "Good," said Lemuel Bardsley. "Frightened men keep records. It is how they sleep." He filed on the 29th of January in the district court at Cheyenne on behalf of 9 plaintiffs alleging fraud, forgery, and conspiracy against Rufus Waverly and the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company. The news reached Cedar Gap on the 31st. The trouble started on the 1st of February. The letter came out from town by the mail rider, and it was 3 lines long, and it was courteous. The Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company, holding the note of Judah Yardley in the sum of $3,180, and observing certain conditions in the security clause of the amended instrument, was obliged to declare the whole sum due and payable in 30 days, on or before the 4th of March, 1889. Judah read it twice at the kitchen table. 30 days, he said. He can't do that. He can do it. It's in the amendment I never signed. He set it down carefully, the way you set down something hot. "Clem, in March I have got nothing. I have got calves on the ground in 6 weeks and a shipping check in October. There is no man in this territory who has $3,000 loose in March. He knows that. He has known it since the day he wrote the clause." "Then he's not trying to collect," Clementine said. "He's trying to have your quarter section sold at the courthouse door before Bardsley's case is ever called. That's about the size of it. Then he's frightened." Judah looked up at her. "Judah, a man who is winning does not hurry," she said. "My father used to say that. A man who is winning takes his time and lets you make your own mistakes. Waverley has been strolling for 3 years. 2 days after Bardsley files, he is running." She put her hand flat on the letter. "This is the first thing he has ever done in a hurry, and I mean to make him do a great many more." The talk started that same week, and it started well, the way good poison does. It was not said out loud in front of anybody who might answer it. It was said in the doorway of the mercantile and over the fence at the school and in the back room of the bank where the Stock Association men played cards on Thursdays. It was said in the form of a question, which is the safest form, because a question cannot be called a lie. Had anybody, it was asked, ever seen this woman's marriage lines? Where was this husband buried exactly? Was it not a strange thing, how she had come to Cedar Gap with nothing at all, and gone straight out to the one man in the county too, broke down with grief to know what was being done to him, and taken over his kitchen, and taken over his books, and now stood to have his land if the old fellow's heart gave out? Was it not convenient, the baby? A baby will open a door that nothing else will open. Was that not, when you thought about it, a hard use to put a child to? Delly Thatcher told her all of it, word for word, standing in the feed store with her jaw set. "I've been 40 years in this town," Delly said, "and I have never yet heard a story get around that fast on its own legs. Somebody's carrying it." Clementine rode home and did the evening chores and got supper and did not say anything, and at the end of it, when the dishes were done and the lamp was lit, she stood by the table with her hands on the back of a chair. "Judah, there's talk in town about me." "I know it. You've heard it?" Wesley Coyle told me Tuesday. He was so mad he could hardly get it out. Judah kept oiling the bridle. He wanted to go and whip a man over it. I told him no. Clementine's hands tightened on the chair back. Amos is buried at Elkhorn Draw, she said, on the rise east of the house, and there's a stone I cut the letters into myself, and I cut them crooked. Our lines are in the Baptist Register at Broken Bow, Nebraska, the 6th of May, 1885, and you can write to the minister there and he will answer you, and I will pay the postage. Judah Yardley put the bridle down. Clem, he said, sit down. I'd rather stand. All right, stand. He looked at her steady. I'm not going to write to any minister in Nebraska. I'm not going to ask you for one paper. You have been in my house 4 months, and in that time you have doctored my stock and mended my fence and found $1,100 of theft in my own books that I was too sorry for myself to look at. And you have never once asked me to believe anything I couldn't see with my 2 eyes. He picked the bridle back up. A man that needs a document to know what you are wouldn't be able to read it. Clementine stood there a moment. Then she said, I'll want it said out loud, though. Not for you, for the rest of them. Say it where? The Grange, she said. The 9th. Every outfit in the valley will be in that hall. The Grange Hall at Cedar Gap held about 90 people, and on the 9th of February there were 140 in it, standing along the walls and sitting on the windowsills, because the whole country had heard there would be something worth hearing. Ruth Waverley was there, in the second row, hat on his knee. Clementine Ainsley came up the aisle in her good dress with her daughter on her hip, and handed the baby to Delly Thatcher at the front bench, and climbed the 2 steps to the platform, and set down on the table a ledger, a bundle of certified copies, and her butcher paper. The room got very quiet. My name is Clementine Ainsley, she said. I'm 23 years old. I was born at Broken Bow, Nebraska. My husband was Amos Ainsley, and he is dead, and there has been some question about that in this town, so I will answer it once. He is buried at Elkhorn Draw. Our marriage is in the Baptist Register at Broken Bow, the 6th of May, 1885, and any one of you may write and ask, and I will pay the postage of every letter. Nobody moved. Now that is the last word I will say about my character, Clementine said, because my character is not the question in this valley, and whoever taught you it was, did it on purpose. She put her hand on the ledger. Marta Sedge borrowed $900 and was told she owed $1,600. Ephraim Coyle borrowed $1,400 and was told he owed $2,600. Amos Pettibone borrowed $600 and was told he owed $1,300. Judah Yardley borrowed $2,000 and is told tonight that he owes $3,180 and has 30 days to find it in February with his calves not on the ground. She lifted the certified copies. In every one of those files there is an amendment adding money advanced for improvements. Not one of those people ever received that money. Not one of them signed that paper. Every one of those amendments is recorded in the Cedar Gap Land Office, and I have paid the fee and got the copies, and they are on this table, and any man or woman in this room may come up here and read them tonight with their own eyes. She turned one of the sheets over and held it out toward the lamps. And every one of them, ladies and gentlemen, is written on a printed form that carries the mark of a Cheyenne stationer, and that mark reads, Form 9, 1887. She let that sit. Marta Sedge's amendment is dated 1886. Ephraim Coyle's is dated 1886. My husband's is dated the 14th of October, 1886. She set the paper down. Somebody in this county wrote 1886 on paper that was not printed until 1887. That is not a mistake in a column. That is a man forging a year. Somewhere in the middle of the hall a chair scraped. I'm not asking you to like me, Clementine said. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for the widow with the baby, and I would be obliged if you never did. I'm asking you to walk up here and read the record, that is all. Read the record, and then decide who in this valley has been telling stories. Then she came down off the platform and took her daughter back from Delly Thatcher and sat down. For about 4 seconds nothing happened at all. Then Wesley Coyle got up and walked to the table, and then a rancher named Hollis from the South End, and then the blacksmith, and then the preacher's wife with the kind eyes and the nervous mouth, and then so many of them that they had to make a line down the aisle, and the line took 40 minutes, and Ruth Waverley sat in the second row through the first 15 of them, with his hat on his knee and his face perfectly pleasant. He left before the end. They came for the bar hour 10 days later, on a grey Tuesday morning, 4 men on horses with a 5th driving an empty wagon. Clementine saw them from the corral at 1/2 mile because she had been looking down that road every morning for 10 days. She sent the Tuesday boy running for Judah in the willow bottom, and she put Jasper in the crib and shut the house door, and she took the coil of her father's rope off the saddle horn and stepped up on the sorrel gelding and rode down to the gate, and she got there first. The man in front was named Kell, a big loose-jointed fellow who did rough work for wages, and he had a folded paper in his glove. "Morning, ma'am. We've got a writ of possession on this property. You'll want to stand aside." "Let me see it." "It's a court paper." "Then it will stand being looked at," Clementine said. Kell hesitated, and then handed it down, because there was a woman sitting a horse in the gate, with a rope in her hand, and something in her face that made a man want the thing settled correctly. She read it. It was beautifully done. It ordered the sheriff of the county to put the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company in possession of the deeded quarter of Judah Yardley, and it carried a seal, and it carried a signature over the words, by order of the district court. Clementine's thumb went down the margin, along the bottom edge, to a mark no bigger than a seed. Form 9, 1887. She looked up, and afterward Wesley Coyle said that he had seen a woman look like that exactly once before, at a branding, half a second before a rope went out. "Mr. Kell," she said, "there is no order of any court on this land. The case is filed at Cheyenne, and it has not been called, and Lemuel Bardsley has a stay signed by Judge Ellery Pike, and it is nailed inside my kitchen door this minute, and this paper you are holding is not a writ. It is a forgery, written on the same stationery as every other lie in this valley, and if you ride through this gate today, you will not be evicting anybody. You will be committing a felony for $2.50 a day." Kell's face went slack. "Now," Clementine said, "you are welcome to turn around." He turned his horse. 3 of them turned with him. The 4th, a narrow man on a good gruller, did not. He said something about a woman running her mouth, and he touched his horse and came through the gap alongside her at a lope for the meadow gate. Clementine Ainsley had been roping since she was 9 years old. She put the loop on the horn of his saddle at 11 feet and dallied, and set the sorrel back on his hocks, and the gruller stopped as though it had hit a wall, and the narrow man went over the front of it into 6 inches of February mud and slid a good ways. She sat there with the rope tight while he got up. "You can walk to town," she said, "or you can ride to town, but you will do the one or the other because you are not going up that meadow." He rode, and Clementine came back through the gate past Judah, who had arrived at a dead run from the willow bottom with a rifle he had not needed and had never taken off his shoulder, and she handed him the folded paper without a word and rode straight onto the sorrel's tracks toward Cedar Gap, 13 miles, to put it in the hands of the telegraph operator and wire Cheyenne before anybody thought to ask for it back. That night, at 11 o'clock, somebody knocked at the bar door. It was Solomon Barlow, on a hired horse, in a coat over his nightshirt, and he was shaking so hard he could not get the words out in the doorway, and he had a Japan tin box under his arm. They sat him down, and Judah poured him coffee, and Solomon Barlow held the cup in both hands and told it. He had owed money in '85. Not a great deal, $300 and some, lost at cards in Rawlins over 2 bad nights, and a recorder on a government salary does not have $300. Ruth Waverley had paid it for him, kindly, and had said nothing about it for a year and a half, and then one afternoon had come into the land office and set a paper on the counter and asked him to record it, and had not needed to say anything else at all. 22 of them, Barlow said. 22 in 2 years. He wrote them. I never once saw a borrower sign one. I recorded them, and I indexed them, and I put my name in the witness line, and every time I did it, he gave me money, and every time he gave me money, I wrote it down. You wrote it down, Clementine said. Solomon Barlow set the Japan tin box on the table and opened it. Inside were 4 small memorandum books, and in them, in a 9-year recorder's neat square hand, was every payment. The day it was handed over, the sum, the instrument recorded, and the initials R.W. $240 against Sedge, paid the 4th of February, 1887, for a paper dated the 9th of March the year before, $300 against Coyle, $200 against Yardley, and $60 against a homestead in Elkhorn Draw, paid the 9th of February, 1887, for a paper dated the 14th of October of the year before, $60. Amos Ainsley's whole life had been sold for $60, and the man who took the money had written it in a book so that he could sleep. Why now? Judah said. Because he had Kell carry a forged court order out here today, Barlow said, and his voice cracked in the middle of it. A bank paper is one thing. A man can tell himself a bank paper is business. He counterfeited the district court, Mr. Yardley. He put that court seal on a paper that court never made. He will not stop, and I am the only man alive besides him who knows every one of them. And when this comes apart, he will need somebody to have done it. He looked up, and his eyes were wet and steady for the first time in 4 months. It is going to be me or him, and I would rather go to prison for what I did than hang for what he did. Clementine looked at the little books a long while. She thought about a man in a doorway with his hat in his hands. She thought about $60. Then she said, "Mr. Barlow, you are going to write all of that out tonight, and I'm going to make 3 copies, and one of them goes to Cheyenne on the morning stage, and one of them stays with Mrs. Thatcher, and one of them stays with me." She set down paper and pushed the lamp toward him. "And when it is finished, you may sleep in the bunkhouse, because if you ride back into that town tonight, you will not be in it in the morning." Lemuel Bardsley read the confession twice and said, "Well," and then, "Well," again. And then he wired Cheyenne, and on the 26th of February a deputy United States Marshal took Ruth Waverly out of the Cedar Gap Bank at 4 in the afternoon in front of the whole street. The trial was set for the first week of April at the District Court in Cheyenne, before Judge Ellery Pike. The district attorney was 31 years old and had never tried a paper case in his life, and he did the wisest thing he ever did in that office, which was to ask Lemuel Bardsley to sit at his table and try it for him. Waverly's lawyers came up from Denver, 2 of them, and they were very good, and their case was simple, and it was dangerous. They did not deny that the amendments existed. They said the borrowers had signed them and forgotten, being ignorant or being drunk or being old. They said Solomon Barlow was a confessed criminal, buying his own neck with a story. They said the printer's mark proved only that a busy office had used up an old form and started on a new one, and that a stationer's inventory was a thin rope to hang a respected man with. "What they will do," Bardsley told them, the last week of March at the kitchen table, "is put every one of you on that stand and make you the question. And what we have not got, and I will not pretend otherwise, is one single untampered original note to lay beside a forgery so the jury can see the 2 of them together. The bank held every original. The bank still holds them, and what the bank produces will be whatever the bank wishes to produce." Clementine had Amos's wooden box down off the shelf that same night and went through it a 3rd time, the way she had gone through it in Nebraska and again in September. The foreclosure notice, 4 tax receipts, a bill for a broken singletree, a photograph made at Grand Island the week they married. No note, and no copy of one because the bank had taken up the original at the sale, the way banks do, and given him a line in a ledger for it. "It isn't there," she said. "I have looked 3 times. "Then we go with what we have," Bardsley said, "and we go early, and we do not promise anybody more than we can carry." That was the last night of March. Clementine went to bed and did not sleep, and at 2 in the morning she got up and lit the lamp and packed the basket for the journey, because they were to take the train from Rawlins in the morning, and the child would need her things. She took out the flannel gowns and the knit cap. She took out the rag doll Deli Thatcher had made. She took out the christening blanket, folded at the bottom, that had come from Nebraska. Under it was a flat oilskin packet, sewn shut along one edge with saddle thread. Clementine sat down on the floor with it in her hands. She remembered it, the way you remember a thing you were too full of grief to hear. Amos, 3 days before he died, propped up in the bed with his lips gone grey, looking at the shape of her under the shawl where his child was, pushing something at her with a hand that would not close right, saying, "Put it with the baby's things, Clem. It's the child's. It's the only thing I've got left to leave it." She had thought he was wandering. She had put it in the bottom of the cradle basket she was sewing that winter, where he said, and had never once looked for 13 months, because it was the last thing he ever gave anybody, and she had not been able to bear the sight of it. She cut the saddle thread with her sewing scissors. Inside was one sheet of paper, unfolded flat and clean, a promissory note dated the 2nd of June, 1885, in the sum of $800 at 7%, secured against the homestead in Elkhorn Draw, signed by Amos Ainsley in his own careful hand, and signed by Rufus Waverly, and stamped in the lower corner with the round purple stamp of the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company, borrower's copy. 1 page, no amendment, no $410 advanced for improvements, no penalty clause, nothing at all but $800 honestly borrowed by a man who walked 11 miles rather than ask for a horse. The lamp burned. In the crib, Jasper slept with her fists up beside her ears. Clementine Ainsley sat on the floorboards of that room until the window went grey, holding the only untampered original in the Cedar Creek Valley, which her husband had pressed into her hands with the last strength he had, for a daughter he did not live to see, because he had known, somehow at the end, that the paper mattered. She woke Judah at 5. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put it down, and put his hands over his face for a moment, and when he took them away he said, "Clem, do you know what you've got?" "I know exactly what I've got," she said. "Go hitch the team." The courtroom at Cheyenne was full for 4 days. They put Marta Sedge on the stand, and the Denver men tried to make her out a bitter old woman, and she agreed that she was bitter, and said she had earned it, and gave the date and the hour of every conversation she had had with Ruth Waverly for 4 years, and got down off that stand having lost them a quarter of the jury. They put Solomon Barlow on for a day and a half, and made him say out loud what he was, and he said it. And then Lemuel Bardsley walked him through the 4 memorandum books, entry by entry, and matched every payment to a recording date, and by the end of it the courtroom had stopped looking at Barlow altogether, and had begun looking at the man in the grey suit at the defence table. They put Kell on for 20 minutes on the morning of the 3rd day. He said he could not read. He said he had been handed a folded paper and $40, and told which gate to take it to, and he said who had handed it to him, and he had to say it twice, because the first time nobody at the back of the room could hear him. And on the 4th day they called Clementine Ainsley. The elder of the Denver lawyers rose to cross-examine her, and he was courteous, and he began where they had all known he would begin. He asked how long she'd been in the territory. He asked her circumstances upon arrival. He asked whether it was true she had arrived in Cedar Gap, with no situation, no relations, and no money. "That's true," Clementine said. "I had $11.40. He asked whether she now resided upon the property of the man whose mortgage was at issue. "I do. I'm his hired hand, and his bookkeeper, and I draw $8 a month, and every dollar of it is written down in a book that Mr. Bardsley has put in evidence, because I've kept my own accounts since I was 14. He asked, with regret in his voice, whether she did not stand to gain considerably if her employer's debt were struck down. Clementine looked at the jury. "Sir," she said, "I have been asked about my character in 3 counties now, and I have noticed a thing about it. Every time somebody starts talking about what kind of woman I am, it is because they have been asked a question about a number, and they would rather not answer it." She folded her hands. "So ask me about the numbers. Ask anybody in this room about the numbers. 9 people borrowed money in this valley, and every one of them was told they owed $1,000 more than they did. And it does not matter one particle whether I am a good woman or a bad one, because the arithmetic does not know me." Then Lemuel Bardsley rose for redirect, and he was very slow about it, and he said, "Mrs. Ainsley, counsel has told this jury that no untampered original note exists in this affair. Do you know of one?" "I do." "Where is it?" "It is in my daughter's basket," said Clementine, "where my husband told me to put it 3 days before he died. He never saw her. He was 3 months in the ground before she was born." She took it out. She read it into the record, in a clear voice that did not shake, $800 at 7%, secured against the homestead at Elkhorn Draw, signed by Amos Ainsley and by Rufus Waverly, stamped borrower's copy. Then Bardsley laid it on the rail beside the bank's file version of the same note, and carried the 2 of them along the jury box, slow, so that every man could look, and there it was, plain as a broken fence, 1 page against 2, 1 signature against a signature and a forgery, 7% against 7% and a penalty clause, and at the foot of the second sheet, in type no bigger than a seed, a Cheyenne stationer's mark, reading Form 9, 1887, on a document dated the 14th of October, 1886. Clementine looked across the courtroom at Ruth Waverly while the jury passed the papers. He did not look pleasant any more. He looked like a man reading his own name on a stone. The jury was out 2 hours and 40 minutes. They convicted Rufus Waverly on 11 counts of forgery, on 4 counts of uttering a forged instrument, and on conspiracy to defraud, and Judge Ellery Pike, who had spent a part of February looking at a paper that carried his court seal and had never once been near his court, gave him 14 years in the Territorial Penitentiary at Laramie. The civil judgment came down in May. Every amendment void, every foreclosure founded upon one set aside, the lands restored, and restitution ordered out of the assets of the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company to 9 families, with interest, at 7%. Marta Sedge got her North Fork back, and her husband under the cottonwood at the crossing, and she stood on the courthouse steps at Cheyenne and cried for 4 minutes, and then said she would thank everybody to forget they had seen it. The Elkhorn Draw homestead came back to the estate of Amos Ainsley, deceased, and thence to his heir, who was 11 months old and asleep at the time. They came home on the train and drove out from Rawlins in the wagon, and it was the middle of May, and the whole country was green in a way it had not been in 3 years. Judah stopped the team on the last rise above the bar R, where the light was in the kitchen window, because he had left a lamp lit for a house with nobody in it, out of habit, for 3 years running. "I've got something to say," he said, "and I've had it about half said since November, so bear with me." "Say it." "You've got a place of your own now. Elkhorn Draw is yours, and there's money coming, and you could go there tomorrow, and by rights you should, and everybody in this valley would say you'd earned it twice." "That's all true," Clementine said. "It is." He turned the hat over once in his hands, the same way he had done on Bishop Street in September. "So, I'll say the rest badly. 3 years ago, I quit. I didn't die, but I quit, and I would have gone on quitting until they buried me in the corner with Ada and Samuel, and then you came up that road with a baby and $11.40, and you started fixing things, and one morning last winter I woke up before you did, and I was glad about it, and I sat there in the dark, and I thought, I am glad about a Tuesday. I hadn't been glad about a Tuesday in 3 years. He looked at her. "Stay, not to work. I've got no more work in me to offer you that you haven't already done better. Stay, because I love you, and because that child says my name, and because there is not one thing in this world I want that isn't sitting on this wagon seat." Clementine Ainsley looked down at the little house with the light in the window. "Judah Yardley," she said, "the first thing you ever said to me was that I was no burden. Do you know I'd been in that town 4 hours and you were the 4th door? 2 of them were Christians." "I remember. I've had one prayer for 1.5 years, she said, "and it was smaller than you'd think. It was just somewhere to put her down." "Put her down here," he said. So she did. They were married the 9th of June, 1889, in the Grange Hall at Cedar Gap, because the church would not have held everybody. And Martha Sedge stood up with her, and Dellie Thatcher cried harder than the bride, and Wesley Coyle brought a fiddle, and Lemuel Bardsley came up from Cheyenne on the train at 70 years of age and danced twice. Solomon Barlow served 2 years at Laramie, and came out and went to work for a surveyor at Casper, and every Christmas for the rest of his life he sent a letter to the Bar R, and every Christmas Clementine answered it. The summer of 1890 was dry, the driest anybody could remember, and it was the making of that valley rather than the ruin of it. The 9 restored outfits filed articles together in the spring and formed the Cedar Creek Ditch Association, and Clementine Yardley kept its books, because nobody else wanted the job, and because she would not have let anybody else have it. Every man and woman on the creek got water by the hour and by the inch, written down, signed for, and posted on the wall of the Grange where any fool could go and read it. In August, when the North Fork ran down to a trickle, not one outfit south of the Bar R lost a cow for want of water, and the price of a deeded quarter on Cedar Creek went to $22 an acre, which was, almost exactly, what the Cedar Gap Stock and Land Company had calculated it would go to. That was the part Clementine allowed herself to enjoy. The country got rich in precisely the way Ruth Waverley had planned, and every dollar of it went into the hands of the people he had planned to take it from. She leased out Elkhorn Draw to a young couple from Nebraska at a rent that made Dellie Thatcher call her a soft-headed woman, and she rode over twice a year to look at the stone on the rise, the one with the crooked letters, and she never did get it recut. Amos had been a plain man. It suited him. The Bar R ran 400 head by the fall of 91 and 600 by 94. Judah bought back the good saddle horses he had sold to pay Lemuel Bardsley, one at a time, paying more than he got for them, and Clementine wrote every transaction down in the book and told him he was the worst horse trader in the territory, and he agreed and bought another one. He never learned to cook. In all the years that came after, the man produced exactly one thing out of that kitchen, and it was coffee, and it was perfect. And their second child, a boy they named Amos Samuel Yardley, grew up believing that the making of coffee was a sacred office reserved to fathers, and was a grown man before anybody disabused him. Jasper Ainsley grew tall and brown and loud. She could ride at 4 and rope a post at 6, and she called Judah Papa from the time she could say anything at all, and there came an evening when she was 5 at supper, when she asked in the flat interrogating way of children whether Papa was her real papa or her other one was. The table went quiet. Judah put his fork down and thought about it honestly, which was the only way he ever did anything. "Your first father was named Amos Ainsley," he said, "and he was a better man than me, and he gave you the only thing he had left at the end, and it turned out to be the thing that saved this whole valley. You'll hear about him every year of your life, and I am your papa, and I have been since you were 4 months old and could not hold your own head up, and neither one of those facts crowds the other one out." "Oh," said Jasper, and ate her potatoes. Later, on the porch in the dark, Judah said, "Was that right?" "It was right," Clementine said. "There's no book on it." "There's no book on any of it," she said. "A house is a thing somebody hands you. A home is a thing you build, and you build it out of whatever is lying around, and mostly what's lying around is broken." It was the 11th of October, 1894, when Clementine came out of Thatcher's Mercantile with a sack of coffee under her arm and found a girl sitting on the step. She was about 17 and thin, and she had a carpet bag and no coat worth the name, and it was going to freeze that night. Anybody could smell it. Clementine stood there a moment with the sack in her arms. She knew that step. She had counted $11.40 on that step, 6 years before, near enough to the day, in the dark, while her daughter cried against her shoulder, and a whole town walked past. "Evening," she said. The girl looked up and looked back down and said, "I'm not begging, I'm waiting on the stage. The stage went at 4. Then I'm waiting on tomorrow's. That's a long wait in October." Clementine sat down on the step beside her, which no one had done for her, and which she had thought about a great deal since. "What's your name?" "Zebediah Frey." "That's a fine name." "It's a boy's name. My father wanted a boy, and he got me, and he wasn't the sort of man to change a plan." She said it to her shoes. "He died in June. My uncle's got the place now, and he's got 7 of his own, and he told me at harvest there wasn't room, and he wasn't cruel about it, and I don't know why that made it worse." "I know why," Clementine said. The girl looked at her sideways then, the way you look at somebody who has said the exact true thing. "Can you cook?" "Some." "Can you learn to ride?" "I can ride." "Then here is what I've got," Clementine Yardley said. "There is a ranch 7 miles out on Cedar Creek with a house that has more rooms than it has people in it. There is a room at the north end with a door that locks from the inside, and I will hand you the key myself when we get there. There is work, and it is hard, and I will pay you what I would pay a man, and I will write down what you earn and what you draw, and you may look at that book any hour of the day or night." She stood up and shifted the coffee. "And there is a woman out there who will be glad of the company, because she is the only one on the place who can add." Zebediah Frey did not move. "I haven't got any money," she said. "I've got $4. "You keep it." "Ma'am, I don't want charity." Clementine Ainsley Yardley smiled then, out on the boardwalk in the cold, in front of a door that had once been shut in her face, and she said the thing that had been said to her, and she said it exactly. "You're no burden here, miss," she said. "Not one bit. Get your bag." And they went out of Cedar Gap in the wagon in the dark, with the lamps of the town behind them, and the road running up along the creek where the cottonwoods stood black against the last blue in the bottom of the sky, and 7 miles ahead of them, in a small house on a low rise, somebody had left a light burning in the kitchen window.